Okay, so I'm back with another Pauper deck tech. So the deck today is Mono White Soldiers. So this is a deck that I've been tweaking around for quite a few weeks now. I've tried out various different versions of it. This version is a much more aggro, lower curve version, but more mid-rangey versions of soldiers are also possible, I think, and be quite decent. So there are quite a few good Pauper soldier cards that are more suited for a mid-range strategy. So like, I'll put a few up on the screen, like Ballyrush Banneret, Palace Sentinels. So there are quite a few. So, but this version is a much more aggro one. We've got lots of low mana cost creatures, and basically the idea is just to flood the board with tons of little white weenie creatures, and then hopefully pump them up with some tribal payoffs like Veteran Swordsmith, and spells like Guardian's Pledge, which pump your whole board. Okay, so let's take a look at the deck. So we're running 19 lands, just a bunch of plains, and then 3 Secluded Steppes for cycling. Okay, in terms of 1-drops, first up we have Icatian Javelineers, which is a pretty cool 1/1 soldier. So it enters the battlefield with a javelin counter on it, and you can tap it to remove a javelin counter and deal 1 damage to any target. So quite a flavorful card. The dude throws his javelin and can hit a target, so yeah, can be very useful. Nice to pick off creatures with toughness 1. Then of course we have Thraben Inspector, which is just a very good Pauper card, sees a ton of play, and just so happens to be a soldier. So of course it's 1 for a 1/2, and when it enters the battlefield you investigate, which means you can create a colorless clue token, which has pay 2, sacrifice it, draw a card. Okay, next up we have another one of our soldier tribal payoffs. This is War Falcon. 1 mana for a 2/1 with flying, and it can't attack unless you control a knight or a soldier. So this is very cool. 1 for a 2/1 flyer is very aggressive. And of course in this deck, since most of the deck is soldiers, it can pretty much always attack. Then of course we're running Cartouche of Solidarity, which quite a few decks play this, like the mono white heroic decks also make good use of this. So it's a 1 mana aura. The enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and first strike, and when Cartouche of Solidarity enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. Unfortunately it's a warrior, not a soldier, but I've still been quite happy with this card as is. Okay, let's move on to the 2-drops. So here's a card from Midnight Hunt. So Cathar Commando is pretty cool. 2 mana for a 3/1 with flash, and you can pay 1 mana to sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. So it's basically a main boardable sideboard card in a way. It's artifact and enchantment hate on a stick, and the fact that it's 2 for a 3/1 with flash is not a bad body. So yes, I've been pretty happy with this card. I feel it gives you a bit more game against certain decks. Just being able to have a bit more of that removal in the main board is pretty cool. Next we have Kor Skyfisher, another Pauper staple. So 2 for a 2/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. So a lot of decks run this in combination with cards like Experimental Synthesizer, and any card essentially that you want to be bouncing back to your hand. So in this deck we don't abuse Kor Skyfisher that much, but you can get some value, like from bouncing Thraben Inspector back to your hand, playing it again to get another clue, or by bouncing Cartouche of Solidarity to get another token. Okay, so now we also have Squadron Hawk. This is not a soldier, but the fact that it's just a very solid card justifies its inclusion in my opinion. Of course, famous card, 2 mana for a 1/1 flying. When it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for up to 3 cards named Squadron Hawk and put them into your hand. So yeah, Squadron Hawk is one of the best ways to just fill your hands with little creatures. Then, in terms of removal, we're running 4 copies of Journey to Nowhere, 2 mana. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature, and when Journey to Nowhere leaves the battlefield, the exiled creature returns. So basically, it's creature removal, 2 mana to exile a creature. One of the better removal options that white has. Can remove most threats that are going to be a problem for you, and at 2 mana, that's a relatively cheap rate for the effect. Okay, so in terms of 3 drops, we've got our little miniature lord over here, Veteran Swordsmith, 3 for a 3/2. Other soldiers you control get +1/+0. So on the one hand, I like this card a lot, and it's kind of like a key feature in the deck, but on the other hand, I also find it a bit underwhelming at times, because often the moments where this card is doing the most are the situations where you already have a decent board. So to some extent, this card is a bit of a win more card, but at the same time, just having the payoff for running so many soldiers makes me reluctant to cut it from the deck. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are, and perhaps there's better options to include. Okay, so in terms of going in for the kill, one of our main spells for ending games quickly is Guardian's Pledge. 3 mana for an instant. White creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. So that's a pretty powerful pump effect. When your board's just full of small creatures, you're suddenly giving them all +2/+2 can mean a hell of a lot of damage is coming across to your opponent's face. Okay, then essentially as like a third copy of Guardian's Pledge, we have Gempalm Avenger. So this is 6 mana for a 3/5, but it also has cycling, which is the main reason we're using it. So you can pay 3, discard this card, draw a card, and then when you cycle this card, all soldiers get +1/+1 and gain first strike until end of turn. So this is a bit weaker than Guardian's Pledge in the sense that it only affects soldiers and it only gives +1/+1, but then on the upside, it gives the soldiers first strike as well, and you draw a card. And of course, in the super late game, if you happen to have 6 mana, you can just play this, although that's not what you'd really want to be going for. Okay, and then finally, we have this 4-drop, which actually costs less. It's another new-ish common from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. So it's 4 mana for a 2/2, but it costs 1 less for each creature you attacked with this turn. And since this is a white weenie deck that attacks with lots of creatures, very often this is coming down for 2 mana or for 1 mana. And then it also says when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. So this is very cool for just drawing a card to replace itself, and just yet another cheap soldier threat to chuck down on the board. Okay, so now let's take a look at the sideboard. The sideboard is not set in stone, but this is currently quite a decent one. We're running 4 copies of Dust to Dust, one of the best, if not the best, artifact hate spells in all of Pauper. So it's 3 mana, exile 2 target artifacts. So yeah, 2 for 1, very, very powerful. Okay, then we're also running a few copies of Hallow, which is quite interesting. So it prevents all damage target spell will deal, and then you gain life equal to the damage prevented. So against the right matchups, this can be quite a blowout. Okay, then we're also using this card, which recently got downshifted to common, which is very, very cool. I've had a good time using this card. I think it's decent. So this is Test of Faith, 2 mana for an instant. Prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to target creature this turn. And then you put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented this way. So this is a very cool card for saving your creatures from damage. Like let's say your opponent tries to bolt one of your soldiers, or in combat, a much bigger creature blocks one of your soldiers. You can cast this to prevent 3 damage, and then put 3 +1/+1 counters on the soldier. So basically it saves the creature and it pumps it as well. Very underrated card. Okay, then in terms of more artifact removal, we're running Revoke Existence. So like Dust to Dust, this isn't a destroy spell, it exiles, which is very good against the indestructible artifacts like the indestructible artifact lands. And of course, this can hit enchantments as well, so good against boggles and a whole bunch of strategies. Then good old Relic of Progenitus, why not? Excellent graveyard hate. And then some lone missionaries for burn decks, essentially. So that's where this deck is right now. Let me know your thoughts or any ideas you have for improving it. At the moment, I think it's quite a decent aggro deck, but some tweaks could definitely take it to the next level. Give it a spin if you want to try it. It's definitely a fun deck. It's quite flavorful and thematic and quite fun to play. Cool, well, I'll see you in the next deck tech, and as always, thanks for watching.